I've been sitting here for about an hour, staring at the blinking cursor, trying to decide if I should even write this. Part of me feels like it's petty, but the bigger part of me, the one that still remembers every time I felt small, dismissed, or laughed at, needs to get it out. Because I've carried this for years, and even though I've achieved more than I thought I ever would, a part of me is still that kid begging for a little acknowledgement from the people who are supposed to love me the most. I grew up in what you'd call a normal middle-class family. My dad was practical to the point of being dismissive about anything creative, and my mom had this passive way of supporting him even when she didn't agree. I was the oldest of three, and the only one who didn't seem to fit into the family's mold. My brother went into finance. My sister became a nurse. Both were praised endlessly for choosing real careers. Meanwhile, I was the dreamer, the one who spent too much time on my computer designing things, building websites, and writing small business ideas in notebooks. When I was 16, I told my parents I wanted to be an entrepreneur. My dad literally laughed. He said, "You mean you want to be unemployed?" I laughed it off too, but that stuck with me. Every time I failed or changed directions, I could hear his voice in the back of my head. Fast forward to college. I majored in marketing, but I spent most of my time working on side projects, little business ideas, brand experiments, anything that made me feel like I was building something real. My parents called it playing business. They used to brag about my siblings' jobs at family gatherings and conveniently skip over me. When my mom introduced us to her friends, she'd say, "This is my daughter, the nurse. This is my son, the banker. And this is our creative one." After college, I started my first startup with 2 friends. It failed spectacularly. I moved back home for a few months while figuring things out, and my dad made a point to bring up how the real world doesn't care about your little ideas. Those months were rough. I got a part-time job, freelanced on the side, and built a small brand consulting business. It was scrappy and exhausting, but for the first time, I started to make real money. Clients came from referrals, and I built a reputation for helping small businesses create strong online brands. Then came the day that changed everything. I'd been working on a digital platform for small creators, a mix of community, education, and tools to help them grow online. I'd been quietly building it for 2 years. No investors. No family help. Just me, my savings, and a few freelancers I paid out of pocket. I was so proud when it was finally ready to launch. I invited my family, my friends, even some old professors. I remember calling my mom a week before the launch and hearing her hesitate before saying, "Oh, honey, that's the same weekend as your sister's engagement dinner. I don't think we can make it." My sister chimed in later, "You can do another launch, right? This one's not that important." I said it was fine. I smiled and told them not to worry. But when the day came, I stood there in a small co-working space, surrounded by my few friends and clients, giving a presentation I'd poured my heart into. My parents weren't there. My siblings weren't there. Not even a text that morning. Just silence. I told myself it didn't matter, that this was about the business, not them. But when I got home that night and saw pictures of my entire family at my sister's dinner, laughing, dressed up, looking proud, I cried. Fast forward 2 years. The company took off. It wasn't overnight, but slow and steady. I learned how to pitch, network, and grow without anyone's validation. We reached over 100,000 users, then 250,000. We started generating real revenue. I finally moved out of my apartment and into an actual office. Every milestone felt like a quiet victory I had to celebrate alone. Then one morning I woke up to an email from a Forbes journalist. She said she'd come across my story through a client and wanted to feature me in an article about self-funded startups changing the creator economy. I thought it was a scam at first, but it wasn't. She interviewed me over Zoom, asked thoughtful questions, and a few weeks later, the piece went live. I'll never forget the feeling of seeing my face on the Forbes homepage. I sat there frozen, tears in my eyes, remembering all those nights I stayed up wondering if I was just wasting my time. I shared the article on social media. Friends congratulated me. My old college professors reached out. My phone buzzed for hours. And then, around 6 p.m., my mom called. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice suddenly dripping with excitement. We just saw your picture. Your dad printed the article. We're so proud of you. I didn't know how to respond. For years, I'd wanted to hear those words, but hearing them now, after everything, felt like someone pressing on an old bruise. I said, "Thanks, Mom," trying to keep my voice even. Then she asked if I could swing by this weekend so they could take a nice family photo with me and the article. That's when it hit me. They didn't care about the work. They cared about the recognition, about being able to tell people, "That's our kid in Forbes." Suddenly, I wasn't the dreamer anymore. I was the successful entrepreneur. I was a badge of pride they could finally wear without embarrassment. I told her I was busy. She sounded disappointed, but said she understood. Then my sister texted, "Damn, Forbes? Okay, boss lady. Send me the link so I can post it on my story." I didn't respond to that one. For a few days, I felt this weird mix of pride and emptiness. I'd achieved everything I thought would finally make them see me differently. But instead of feeling healed, I felt exposed. Like all the years of silence, judgment, and dismissal had just been brushed aside because I finally became worth bragging about. A week later, my dad called. That was rare. He told me he'd shown the article to his coworkers, and they were impressed. Then he said something that almost made me laugh out loud. "See, all that stuff you did finally paid off. Guess I was wrong about you needing a real job." "Yeah," I said, "guess so." After that, I started pulling away. I stopped going home for every little family event. I stopped sending updates about my business. I realized I'd been chasing approval from people who only respected outcomes, not effort, who only showed up when it looked good on paper. The climax for me, the moment that broke whatever attachment I had left, came a few months later at Thanksgiving. My mom had framed the Forbes article and put it on the living room shelf. During dinner, my uncle pointed at it and said, "Wow, Forbes. You must have known she had it in her all along." My dad smiled and said, "Of course. She was always ambitious." That sentence hit me like a punch. I looked at him, wanting to say something, anything, to remind everyone that he'd laughed at me, called me unrealistic, told me I'd fail. But I didn't. I just sat there quietly, cutting my turkey, thinking about how empty validation feels when it comes too late. That night, as I drove home alone, I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd been living my life as if their acknowledgement was the final stamp of success. But in reality, success was the freedom to no longer need it. Now, every time someone mentions the Forbes article or congratulates me, I smile genuinely.